Zyliss, NESLİHAN Şahin'le Türkiye Kozmetik Sektörü programını sunar.
Good evening from Business Channel Türk TV. Today we are hosting Jean-Pascal Osmont from Zyliss Fragrance Company. Welcome. It's very pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much.
Thank you so much because we are really happy to have you here with us. So at first, who is Jean-Pascal Osmont? Can you a little bit tell us about yourself?
Of course. I am French perfumer. I work for 30 years now in the industry of perfumery, and I've been working for many years in big international companies, in very well-known companies in perfumery. And since 2 years now I work for Zyliss Fragrance Company in Istanbul. I have a chemical background. I've done some studies of chemistry, and then I started as a perfumer's assistant for a great perfumer who learned me a lot of things by making his formula, and
nice.
This is how I started, really.
Very nice. Thank you so much. I actually had chance to interview with so many different people that representing different companies. But actually what you are doing is creating smells. So can you please tell us some about Zyliss Fragrance Company? How is it going making fragrances there?
Zyliss Fragrance Company is a Turkish company whose headquarters are in Istanbul, and they also have a lot of offices in abroad, like in Zurich, in Dubai, in Tehran. It's a rather young company compared to some others, and there is an advantage to it. They have a lot of young, passionate people, very dynamic people, curious people. I'm really fascinated by how they explore everything what's around, not only in fragrances, of course, but not only in fragrances, in arts, architecture, and everything. There's a lot of curiosity in this company, and for us perfumer, it's really like food for very valuable food for us for creation and taking all these influences from the outside.
Very good. Jean, also I would like to ask you that your profession is defined as a perfumer, and this is a quite unusual job. I am sure many people will be curious as myself. So what is perfumer and who we call as a Mr. Nose in reality?
To answer this question, I would take a comparison. If you think about cooking, a master chef, for example, to cook a dish, you mix together raw materials. You have the meat, you have vegetables, you have spices sometimes, herbs as well, could be fruits as well. You blend these things together in order to get a dish which has a special taste. It has a taste of this dish. Perfumery is a bit the same. We are not tasting, we are smelling. But we have a range of raw materials ready to use, and the job of the perfumer is to distinguish this smell and learn how to blend them to create a new smell out of it. And
this smell should be a delightful one at the end, right?
Yes, because we are talking of emotions.
Sure.
So of course it has to smell nice, otherwise people won't buy it.
Right. And the other question is, what I heard about Zyliss company is that they do have an internal Perfume Academy inside. What can you tell us about it?
The Zyliss Academy, in fact, is we have 18 junior perfumers internally. And this is a kind of training for perfumers, and it's quite a difficult job to learn, in fact. And they are coached by master perfumers internally, which I am one of them. So my job is to learn them, to take care of them, and to learn them the tricks of creating a perfume. How to smell the raw materials, how to smell the perfumes, how to handle a project. I mean, how can you design a fragrance to answer the customer's need? which is a very difficult part of our job, because to answer a perfumer's need, you really have to understand what the customer wants, and it's not too easy sometimes. You have to recommend him, because sometimes he will not explain the things like he would like to, and it's sometimes very difficult to understand what the customer wants, really.
But still, I think they must be really lucky to have this Perfume Academy in their own country, and from learning from the master perfumers, it's so good luck, right?
Yes, well, I hope so, because it's an old job. Perfumery is not a new job. I mean, there are a lot of things we know how to do things, and there are so many raw materials we can play with as well.
And as far as I know, it's the first time such a thing is happening in Turkey, to have a Perfume Academy inside in a fragrance company.
I think so too.
That's so amazing.
Yes.
And in this case, there is one question immediately comes to the mind, that if anybody can apply to this internal academy that Zyliss fragrance company has?
No, unfortunately, no.
No?
Because it's a very strict process. Because it's a choice which is made by the Zyliss team, but also by human resources. We need to have candidates with a very good chemical skill, first of all, because there is still a lot of chemistry in our job, because we are dealing with fragrance for shampoos and soaps, and so there is a chemical aspect to it. But also, we really need to have enthusiastic people, passionate people, and this is part of the process, because it's an investment. It's a very strong investment. You have somebody for 2-3 years working not for nothing, but learning the job. So it's an investment. So we are very keen on the selection of these people. So it's not so easy, of course.
Passion and being a passionate, I think, are the key words of becoming a perfumer, huh?
Patience is key. You're absolutely right. Because it's not really, I always say that, it's not really the fact that it's a difficult job. It's a long job to learn, to practice, because you make so many trials, unsuccessful trials, before you get something nice, something you wanted to do. It's emotionally, sometimes it can be quite difficult to handle. So the passion is extremely important in that case, so that this is the only element which keeps you on the track, and you won't stop doing your job easily. You see?
Very good. And the other question is that while we have such a perfumer like you in here, master perfumer, I'm sorry, and I do wonder about how to design a perfume. Like, what is the process creating a fragrance? Actually, not the perfume, but fragrance. Like, what is the process? How you design a fragrance? Can you a little bit tell us about it?
Sure. It's a quite complex question. Because there are different dimensions you have to consider. A fragrance, of course, has a smell. The target is to perfume a product. Can be a fine fragrance, can be a shampoo, a soap, can be a product for the house, for cleaning the floor or whatsoever. And a very important point is that the design of the fragrance has to be in line with the function of the product.
Definitely.
You are not if you take the example of a single ingredient, let's talk about mandarin. You are not doing a mandarin for fine fragrance, then you are doing a mandarin for a shampoo, or if you are doing a mandarin for a soap, it will still smell mandarin, because it's the mandarin you are trying to make, but you have to take into consideration the function of the product. A shampoo has to smell shampoo. It has to evoke cleanliness, freshness, and it has to give you the will of cleaning your hair with a shampoo.
Definitely, it has to give us that a meaning, right?
The meaning, the intention.
The intentions.
It's very important.
Has
very
to be
important.
reminded.
And if you take a mandarin made for shampoo, you put it in a fine fragrance, it won't work as well, because it will smell a bit technical, a bit shampoo, a bit. You don't want to have it on your skin.
Definitely. So we can say that a fragrance cannot be used in different cosmetic product groups. For each cosmetic product, even though if it's the same smell, has to be formulated specifically, right?
Yes, it has to be. It has to be adapted. You can't put a fragrance into different applications like this. You have to think about it and to be sure that the equation is right. It smells the product it's supposed to fragrance.
I see. And another question that I want to ask, because I do wonder about it. Jean-Pascal, like I want you to give me some examples. Like for example, the company showed up and told you that, Jean, today we want a very specific, unique fragrance for night cream, for an anti-aging cream. So what is your process? How do you direct yourself? Like how do you design the smell for this specific group of cosmetic products?
This is a very important question, in fact, because it's really the start of the process. And the first thing for us is to perfectly understand what the customer wants. So, and the way to do it is having the customer talking, and we are trying to understand at best what he wants. This is the first thing, because sometimes there is a question of language as well between us. The customer will use some words which are not exactly what we think they are. The translation might be a bit difficult. Sometimes the customer will say, oh, this is too pepper, it smells of pepper. There's no pepper in it, but the customer means something by saying this, so we need to understand. So the language is very important, the first thing. The other thing is to know where it is designed for, the country it's designed for. This is very important because the taste of people, depending on the countries, can be very different. And if you don't pay attention to this kind of thing, you can end up with very, very major problems. If you are using products in your fragrance that people don't know in certain countries, your fragrance will never be accepted. And you have to be careful with this kind of thing. I would take some examples. If you take the citrus notes, more likely the lemon, for example, the perception of a lemon is totally different for us in Europe than in Asia, for example, or in China, where lemon is not perceived as being very clean.
Correct.
Lemon in China, they perceive the kind of dirty smell in a lemon note. So, which is totally the opposite for us in Europe. So it's obvious that if you work for China and you end up with a lemon fragrance, you will never sell it.
Correct.
So this is the kind of thing that us perfumer we have to know.
Actually, I do remember before the program you mentioned something about the customer's request, which was very interesting. I think you said that sometimes they are not sure what do they really want, but they are so much sure about what they don't want.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
very interesting, actually.
It's very true. It's very true, because there are smells they don't like, for sure. So they don't want it.
And also the words might be different for each other's understanding. Jean-Pascal, you have mentioned about countries, like you said that China is different, Asia is different. So I do really wonder, what about Middle East? Can you please tell us a little bit about it?
Middle East is a group of countries which are full of history. And what's very important as well for us in perfumery, we have to consider that. We have to consider the geographical situation of the country. We have to consider the climate of the country, because there is a direct link with these things, with what's growing in the country. So which are the products, the plants that you will find in a certain country or not find in a certain country. It's very important, because once again, people will know the products they have, and they won't know the products they don't have.
Correct.
So you have to take these things into account. And the Middle East market, I think, to my analysis, is directly linked to this kind of things, because the trends and the taste of the people in the Middle East is linked to the product that they are using for many, many decades, many years, like the balsams, the resins, the benzoin, the Peru balsams, and things like this, which are very sticky and strong smells. And this might be the reason why it's a very famous trend in these countries, because historically it's fragrances they have for a long time. It's also because it's a very warm countries.
Correct.
So it's well known that in warm areas the smells are stronger. So you have to cover the bad smells. And so you really need to have strong perfumes to cover these bad smells. And that's it. That's an explanation. So this is also why, as perfumer, we have, before addressing a certain country with our creations, we have to know these things and take these things into account.
So it's really important, I see that. And also, my other question is like, what about Turkey? What can you say about our country?
I would make a parallel with Turkey, to me, between the geographical situation and the taste, the trends of the Turkish market. Turkey is like a bridge between Asia and Europe, and I would say that olfactively it's a bridge as well. You have a strong influence from Europe, of course, looking at very sophisticated, high-class fragrances. But I think you also have an influence from Asia by having very floral, complex and strong floral notes, which is very, very popular in Asia. So I think the olfactive taste of Turkish is right in the middle, like Turkey.
Like Turkey. Thank you very much. And the other question that I do wonder about that, like what are the most precious, most valuable ingredients for perfumery and why?
For me, a valuable ingredient in perfumery is an ingredient, not necessarily an expensive ingredient, but it's an ingredient that I will use in a perfume and be sure that it will give something very nice to my perfume. And we have a few like this. We have the vanilla is one of them. You can be sure by adding some vanilla in a perfume, it will give a very nice, natural and warm, comfortable effect to your fragrance. There's no doubt about this.
I also do like vanilla.
You have products. You have a bergamot oil. To me, is a very nice product. The bergamot is a fruit. It's like a small orange which grows in southern Italy. But it's got the characteristics. It's not only a citrus note. It's also a floral note. So it blends very well in feminine and masculine fragrances. It always gives a very natural freshness to your fragrance. It's one of my favorites as well. And of course, the rose. The rose is one of them. The rose oil is very famous as well for that. It's really, you need a tiny amount of the good rose oil, Turkish rose if possible, and then it makes your fragrance blooming like a bouquet.
Thank you very much for mentioning Turkish roses. Yes,
course.
it's very beautiful. I think so too. And finally, can you please tell us a few words about the technical and the safety standards in perfumery?
Yes, this is a very important point
Correct.
today, because there are a lot of perfumes sold all around the world, and not only for putting on the skin, which of course we have to pay attention to this, because it's no question to put any products on the skin. We have to be very careful with that, because otherwise you can have allergies and things.
It might be the irritants.
Irritants, and you can have some molecules going into the skin, and we don't know what could happen. But also in other fields, like if you work for home care fragrances, you have to pay attention to the biodegradability of products, of course, because if you're putting fragrances into the river, it has to be biodegradable. So this is the kind of thing we pay attention to. So there are more and more regulations we have to follow. It's very important for us to do this, because it's a matter of health. and it's crucial. So it's very important subject, I would say.
But as a perfumer, like what is the point from the safety aspect that you should be careful about while you create that fragrance?
There are products that we know have a potential risk of something which are not biodegradable, or which might have an effect on the skin that we better avoid on the skin, or that products that could have an irritation on lungs as well, so we'd better avoid them in air fresheners, for example, because air fresheners is a fragrance you put in the air, so that you breathe in a high quantity. So we have all the products we are using are screened for that, skin irritation, biodegradability again, and so we know when we work for a certain end product, a soap or a shampoo or something, we know the products that we can use and products that we should not use, or we should limit the use to a certain dosage in the fragrance. So of course it has an impact on the fragrance development. There are things a lot more difficult to make than other things.
Because use limitations and restrictions for specific
and I'm
ones.
not mentioning allergens.
That's what I want to ask,
which
actually.
is key as well, because you find a lot of allergen in a lot of natural products as well. So you have to be very careful with this, and not using some products have to be limited, and you can't use too much of them because of this.
So what about this 26 allergen component for the perfumery? Like, how should we look at them? What should we think about them? It's not that when we use them inside in a cosmetic product or inside in a perfumery, it's not that they will for sure make be an irritant effect. So like
no, of course, especially also because the nature itself contains a lot of allergens. It's a fact. You have a lot of allergen in a lot of essential oils. Can be linalool, citronellol, a lot of natural products contain allergen. We just make sure that we just warn people that the fragrance might have a potential allergen risks. I would say we can't do more. I mean, there's always a risk anyway. You put something on your skin, you always have a risk of something. It's not necessarily coming from the perfume as well. It can come from the cream itself. There's always a risk, but we'd better let people know that the products contain this, and it might have an allergen potential.
Jean-Pascal, I have another question that I really do want to ask. Like, I do think that we are going to the perfumery shop, and after a few smell that we are making, we cannot smell anymore. And I do wonder that, how can you work all day with the fragrances and you can still keep smelling and be still able to recognize the notes? So like, what is the secret about it?
Yes, it's true that smells can accumulate in your nose, and after a while you won't smell anymore. It's very true, but you must know that in fact when you smell something, your brain is working a lot, and the brain is always trying to reduce your capacity of smelling, so that after a while, even if you are in a very polluted atmosphere with smells, after a while you won't smell it anymore, because your brain has neutralized your perception of smell. To give you an example, we always had this experience when you were a child. I guess you were at school and you are in a classroom, and then you have to leave the classroom for 10 minutes, and then you come back to it and then it smells.
You got smell.
You got a lot of smells in the classroom that you didn't notice when you left the classroom. It's exactly the reason why, because your brain has neutralized the smells of the classroom, and when you went out for 10 minutes, it went up again, and so that when you come back to the classroom, you smell the smell of the classroom again. It's exactly the same with fragrances. it's also why when you put a fragrance on yourself, after a while, 10, 15 minutes, you hardly smell it anymore. Why? Because your brain has neutralized it. So the best way is to go outside to breathe some fresh air, or maybe sometimes to smell your own smell. Mm-hmm. It's also a trick, because this is a smell that your brain knows the best, and so it will neutralize it and put your nose back to level 0.
Also, the smelling our own hair will be helpful too, right?
Your own hair, your own arm. Sometimes you can see some perfumers, we do this sometimes. We just smell our own smell, and then after we can smell again.
So coffee won't be helping about it, right?
No, I don't think so. No, coffee, no, because coffee is a very strong smell.
So it's totally different characteristic.
Exactly. So you compensate a smell by another strong smell. So it's not the way of doing it. No, certainly not.
Thank you very much for being here today with us.
It was
so much. It's our pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all we have got time for today. So until next week, have a good evening.
Dinamik, yenilikçi ve yaratıcı dünyamızda hiç bitmeyen tutkumuzla harmanlayarak kokulara hayat vermeye devam ediyoruz. Ve bu çalışma anlayışımızla geldiğimiz noktada bugün dünyanın en hızlı büyüyen esans şirketlerinden biri olmaktan mutluluk duyuyoruz.
Seluz, NESLİHAN Şahin'le Türkiye Kozmetik Sektörü programını sundu.